Hello and welcome to BYJU'S Exam Prep IAS. I welcome you all to yet another explained session. It is Friday, that time of the week where we bring to you the most important news story that has been going around in the past week or so. Today, in this explained session, we will be discussing about what is it that the Supreme Court of India is worried about when it comes to the Election Commission of India. As you know, in the past week, India got a new election commissioner appointed by the President of India, that is Shri Arun Goyal. Although the Chief Election Commissioner's post was not changed, we still have the same Chief Election Commissioner. But what has happened is, interestingly, the Supreme Court of India has taken offense in why is it that the government in the past decade or so is not giving a complete extended tenure to the Chief Election Commissioner. In this explained session today, we will be discussing what exactly did the Supreme Court say, what are the implications, what is the role of the Election Commission of India, and is there something that we need to worry about when it comes to the Election Commission of India. So let's begin without any further ado. Now, the reason why this particular issue is in the news is, as I told you, the Supreme Court, more specifically Justice Joseph, has actually criticized the government, saying that the government of India says a lot about having an independent Election Commission of India. They say a lot that they want to empower the Election Commission of India. However, in reality, if we look at the tenures given to the Chief Election Commissioners, specifically going back to 2004, so it's not just the current government. Since 2004, there has not been any Chief Election Commissioner who has been able to complete his full tenure. As you know, as per the Constitution of India, the Chief Election Commissioners have a tenure of 6 years and they work till the age of 65 years, that is when they retire. Now, as per Justice Joseph, the government of India specifically recommends those names to the President of India who are very near to the 65-year mark. That is why in the past few months we have seen there has been no Chief Election Commissioner that has been able to complete a full 6-year tenure. The problem with this is the shorter tenure that you give to any authority at a position, the lesser are the chances of that authority being able to work independently or actually have a positive impact on that position. And that is why it is a cause of concern. We cannot have, in a country which is the largest democratic country in the entire world, we cannot have a situation where the body that is supposed to uphold the democratic values of India being dependent on the government or not being able to work independently. And that is why the Chief Justice of India is concerned about that. The interesting part is Justice K.M. Joseph himself personally researched the tenures of the last few Chief Election Commissioners. This is his quote. He says that their tenures is highly truncated. Truncated means cut short. And in this way, the so-called independence of the Chief Election Commission and the Election Commission of India as a whole is being compromised. He says that the previous UPA government, that is a Congress government when Manmohan Singh was a Prime Minister, had 6 Chief Election Commissioners in just 8 years. The situation has not improved even after that. The present government, he says, from 2015 to 2022, in these 7 years, they have had 8 Chief Election Commissioners. So on an average, one Chief Election Commissioner is not even getting a tenure of 1 complete year, while the Constitution talks about a tenure of 6 years. That is a big cause of concern, especially at a time when India upholds its democratic values that we hold so dear to us. Now, what exactly has the Supreme Court done apart from this? Apart from criticizing the government for not giving a bigger tenure or larger tenure to the Chief Election Commission, they also asked that we want to see the files of Arun Goyal's appointment. Now, as I told you in the beginning, the reason why this issue is in the news is that the Election Commission of India recently got a new election commissioner. I'm sure all of you know by now, as per the Constitution of India, the Election Commission of India shall comprise of 1 Chief Election Commissioner and as many election commissioners as the President decides from time to time. So it is upon the President to decide how many other election commissioners would there be. Now, the President of India has decided since 1993, we have 2 other election commissioners apart from the Chief Election Commissioner. The reality is that all these 3 have equal powers, just that one is called Chief Election Commissioner, other is called Election Commissioners. But even then, the decisions taken by the commission are taken by the rule of majority. It is not that the chief election commissioner would have more powers over the other. So one of these posts became vacant, and this is where Arun Goyal was appointed. Now, the Supreme Court of India has asked the centre government to show the appointment files, as in, what was the reason behind his appointment? Is it a case of an officer being close to the government and that is why the person is appointed? That is what the Supreme Court is curious about. Now, as I said, the Supreme Court is worried that the Election Commission of India, that needs to be an independent body, should not be working with the government in any way whatsoever. With most of these petitions, you will see that the person who files these kind of petitions against the government orders is the famous advocate Prashant Bhushan. So Prashant Bhushan, who is appearing on behalf of the petitioners, has urged the court specifically to look in the appointment of Arun Goyal as the election commissioner. Now, the Supreme Court of India very, very honestly said that we are very concerned about why is it that the government is appointing some officers close to them as the election commissioner. The court asked the centre to produce the files related to the election commissioner to check any hanky-panky. Now, this is not a kind of language that you expect the courts to use very often, but this is what the court has done. They are saying that they might see evidence of the election commissioner being close to the government, which they do not want to find. That is why they have asked for this file, and they have rejected the government's objection on this file. So government, as usually expected, did not really want to give away the file or any paperwork, but the bench said that we want to see why and how the appointment happened, and we would like to verify that by ourselves. Now, this concern that was raised by the Supreme Court Justice is not actually a wrong concern. If you look at the history of India, there have been very, very few chief election commissioners who were given their full tenure. If you see this list, there are hardly about 3 election commissioners that were given their full tenure, that is the chief election commissioners. Sukumar Sen, India's first chief election commissioner, then we have Kalyan Sundaram, TN Session, they were given a complete tenure or even beyond that, but most of them have not been given a tenure. If you can see the ones that were appointed recently, Naveen Chawla, S.Y. Qureshi, then Naseem Zaidi, all these are very, very recently appointed election commissioners, and their tenure is very, very low as compared to the prescribed tenure, which is 6 years as per the Constitution of India. Now, there is one more issue that is being played out here. See, the larger story of this is, how is it that the government appoints the election commissioners? The Constitution of India says that the election commissioners will be appointed by the President of India. Now, there is no committee as such that gives any advice to the President of India. So what happens is that the President of India gets advice from the government, from the Council of Ministers, more specifically the Prime Minister. Now, in the past, what has happened is there have been many, many demands that we need to have a proper committee, a proper commission of multiple people from the government, from the opposition, maybe from the judiciary as well, that will come together and advise to the President who shall be the next chief election commissioner. But that has not happened. And you can't blame just one party for that. Irrespective of whichever party is in power, all of them want to control who would be the next election commissioner, because all of them know this is such a key position. Now, I'm not saying that they are supposed to influence the elections, but every political party at the end of the day wants a person that they trust, wants a person that is in their good books to be in the Election Commission of India. And this is why multiple commissions have suggested that we should actually opt for some other process. Now, although I'm not comparing any positions, but if you look at some of the other positions in the government of India, like let's talk about the NHRC, the National Human Rights Commission. Let's talk about the CVC, CIC. I'm not saying that these are lesser important as compared to Chief Election Commissioner, but for all these positions, the appointments are done by the President after the advice is given by a committee. That committee does not just have members from the government, but it has members from other parts as well, from the opposition, from the judiciary, etc. And then they take the final call. The same should be the process for the Chief Election Commissioner as well, as per a lot of people. Now, what the Supreme Court is saying here is, maybe, and they are just putting this forward as an idea, they have not made a rule out of it, but they are saying maybe including the Chief Justice of India in this entire process, taking his advice as well when it comes to appointing the Chief Election Commissioner, will actually improve the transparency in the system. It will actually become better, but as you can expect, the government or no political party ideally would actually want that. Every political party would want that we should control who would be the Chief Election Commissioner, who would be the Election Commissioner, because at the end of the day, every small little thing about the elections in India, the parliamentary elections or the state elections, is decided by the Election Commission of India. As you know, the Election Commission of India decides on the schedule of the elections. They decides on the where the elections will be held, when the elections will be held, when the by-polls will be held. They are the ones who impose the model code of conduct. They are the ones who basically have everything under control when it comes to elections. Not just this, even when MPs or members of legislative assemblies or council have to be disqualified for various reasons, it is the Election Commission of India only that gives the advice to either the president or the governor, whatever the case may be. In short, in the entire democratic structure of the country, the elections and everything else that comes with it, it is the Election Commission of India that has all those powers, and they have to work on it independently without any government interference. So it's such an important body. And for that body to not even have an appointing committee, that is actually something which is very, very odd. This is where many people actually go back and take the name of a person called TN Session. The Supreme Court itself actually took the name of TN Session. Now, who was he and why is he remembered? The Election Commission that we know today was not always like this. In the 1970s, 1980s, problems such as booth capturing, people coming and intimidating people, forcing them to vote or forcing them not to vote was very, very common in many parts of the country. Although even back then, the Election Commission of India was supposed to take action against these problems. The Election Commission of India, in fact, actually has the power that they can even cancel certain elections if they think that something wrong has happened. But the reality is, because most of the election commissioners who are appointed are IAS officers or All India Service or central government officer appointed by the government, they are someone who are usually close to the government. And unless something very drastic happens, you don't really see them taking a lot of action, especially against the government. So, Election Commission before TN Session was very different. It was still an independent body on paper, but you hardly saw any action being taken when we had issues such as the booth capturing, violence, etc. It all changed with TN Session. TN Session became the Chief Election Commissioner in 1990 and he served till 1996. He was considered as a very strict, honest state IAS officer. He had a very famous quote. The quote said, "I eat politicians for my breakfast," which he meant to signify that I don't really take orders from politicians, I do my work independently. That was TN Session. Now, TN Session has been credited for a lot of things, but mostly he is credited with actually bringing independence in true sense of the word to the Election Commission of India. The Election Commission of India, the body that we know today, the independent body that can take any decision that they want regarding elections, that is not dependent on the government, all of that in a way was started by TN Session. TN Session was the one who was not worried about taking steps against the government, against any politician who was involved. He in fact cancelled many elections. He took a lot of important decisions to improve transparency in the elections as well. In fact, so much so that even the government after appointing him was very, very unhappy because they thought that he would not play such an independent role as he had started to play. Today's Election Commission of India owes a lot to what TN Session had done during his reform years. Now, there is another story that goes ahead. The other story is the government was actually so fed up of TN Session striking down the government's decisions or not letting anyone influence the elections, that the government of India actually went ahead, asked the president to appoint 2 more election commissioners. When he was the alone person in the Election Commission of India, when he was the Chief Election Commissioner, he used to take all the decisions by himself. Now, because the government wanted that other people should also come in, so that if there is a voting, if he says yes, other 2 members say no, then his decision will not be final. This is why the government actually appointed 2 more election commissioners with him to make it a 3-member body. Such was the impact of TN Session at that point of time. He recently passed away a few months back. Such was the impact of TN Session that he actually forced the government to appoint 2 more election commissioners. Now you might say that government could have removed him, but again, removing chief election commissioner is very, very difficult. First, what reason would you give? What did he do? Second, the removal process of chief election commissioner is the same as removing the Supreme Court judge. Again, a very, very difficult process. Now, let me give you some examples of what TN Session actually did during his time. There were few reforms that he introduced which are in use even today. For example, photo IDs. Now, all of us have that election voting ID. If you're above 18 years of age, you're entitled to have that. You have that photo. That photo ID was not really the case before. He made it mandatory. Why? So that there is no problem of identity. Because earlier, anyone could go that, this is my name and I can just vote. For example, there are a lot of common names in India. You can find multiple people by the same name. So if you don't have a photo identity, that means that anyone can go if you have a similar name. So he was the one who introduced that. Not just this, as I said, he was well known as a very, very strict IAS officer, not afraid of taking the right step, even though orders were given to him to change his steps, to change his action, but he never felt any pressure from those orders. For example, he was the one who properly implemented the Model Code of Conduct. He introduced the voter ID cards. He in fact enforced limits on poll expenses as well. So, as you know, if you're fighting elections in India, Lok Sabha or Legislative Assembly elections, doesn't matter how much money you have, there is a limit to how much you can spend per constituency. That limit is not really very strictly enforced, but TN Session enforced it very, very strictly. He took actions against liquor distribution, against bribery. All these things were done because of him only. And since then, it has become a norm for the Election Commission of India to follow most of these. He banned the use of loudspeakers, religious speeches, etc. In fact, there were instances of news media conducting exit polls, but he wanted to stop, and he stopped the news media a lot of times from actually publishing the result of exit polls so that it does not influence people. Not just this, as I told you, Election Commission was expanded during his tenure. Now, it was expanded because the government was very unhappy that he is taking all these decisions by himself, and the government actually wanted to curb his powers. There were 2 other election commissioners that were appointed, M.S. Gill, who later on became the chief election commissioner as well, and G.V.G. Krishnamurthy. Both of these are appointed. Obviously, it's not official, but both of these are appointed, people say, so that they could actually curtail the powers of TN Session. And that is why TN Session was very, very unhappy. Apparently, the story is he was not even in India. He was in US on a tour when he got to know that this appointment has happened. He came back. He even went to the Supreme Court saying that these 2 people who have been appointed, this is unconstitutional. They should have not have been appointed. I want them to be removed, but that did not happen. For all his contribution to election reforms in India, for being such an upstate IAS officer, he was even given the Magsaysay Award because of his crusade against corruption. The Magsaysay Award was given to him in 1996. As you know, Magsaysay Award is often called as the Nobel Peace Prize for Asia. So he was regarded, or he was given the award for his contribution to fight against corruption. Now, as you know, the Election Commission of India is a constitutional body, meaning that the Constitution of India has itself set up the Election Commission of India. Meaning that there are specific provisions about Election Commission of India in the Constitution. Article 324. This is the article that gives almost all the powers with respect to elections in the Election Commission. So, pretendence of election means overlooking the elections. Direction, control, everything with regards to election will be done by them. So much so that in the states where elections are near, for example in Gujarat, there is Model Code of Conduct that has been imposed in Gujarat. During this period, even the Gujarat police will take directions from the Election Commission of India only. So, Election Commission of India gets a lot of powers just to ensure that there have to be independent elections. Article 325. No person to be ineligible for inclusion or to claim to be included in a special electoral roll meaning that in India, everyone has one single vote, irrespective of your religion, gender, caste, whatever, but you have one single vote. There is no discrimination. 326, elections to House of People means Lok Sabha and Legislative Assembly of the state are on the basis of universal adult franchise. As you know, everyone above 18 years of age have the right to vote. This earlier used to be 21 years. By 61st Constitutional Amendment 1988, it was reduced to 18 years. So more and more voters were added. Article 327 gives the power to Parliament to make provisions with respect to elections in legislatures as well. A lot of times students have this confusion, which I don't want you to have. Many people think that Election Commission of India would conduct elections for Parliament, Lok Sabha, Rajya Sabha, while at the state level, the State Election Commission will do the same. That is not true. Please remember, Election Commission of India conducts elections to Parliament and the state legislatures. When it comes to the State Election Commission, they are responsible for elections in panchayats and in the municipalities. So the elections to the State Legislative Assembly are conducted by the Election Commission of India only. Also, the power of legislature of the state is given in Article 328 to make provisions about elections at the state level. They can make, legislature of the state can make provisions with respect to their state elections, but the election will be conducted by the Election Commission of India only. Not just this, there is bar of interference by courts in electoral matters. So electoral matters, for example, the voter ID list, when the elections will happen, by polls, etc. Usually there is a bar on interference by the courts. The courts do not decide that. Even the government doesn't decide that. It is the Election Commission of India only that has been given the powers to decide that. Now, you might argue that the courts do come in at a later stage if there is an election dispute. That is true. Let's say you have an election dispute about Lok Sabha election, Rajya Sabha election, etc. Then you have the right to go to the High Court, and High Court will hear that matter. However, usually when it comes to conduct of the elections, there is bar on interference by the courts there. The Election Commission of India in that sense has a lot of powers. As I told you, everything regarding elections comes under the purview of the Election Commission. Not just the conducting part of it, even everything with respect to political parties, registration of political parties, giving them recognition, allotting them symbols. Not just this, whenever there is a dispute between the political parties when it comes to election symbols, it is the Election Commission of India only that has the power to decide. For example, recently, as you know, there was a Shiv Sena dispute about the election symbol after split in the party who will get the symbol. Earlier, there had been multiple such instances. For example, there was an incident with Samajwadi Party in Uttar Pradesh, where there were two groups that were formed. Each of the two groups wanted to be called that we are the real party, we should get the party symbol, we should get the official party funds. That power to decide all these and adjudicate all these issues is with the Election Commission of India. They are the ones who decide on the schedule of the elections also, the date of the elections. They are the ones who register the candidates, scrutinize their nomination. Each and everything about elections has to end at Election Commission of India. They also have the advisory role, as I told you earlier. If there is a matter of disqualification of members of parliament, except the anti-defection law. The anti-defection law comes under the purview of the Speaker of the Lok Sabha or the Chairperson of Rajya Sabha. But when it comes to disqualifying members of parliament on other reasons, the President of India disqualifies the members only on the advice of the Election Commission of India. Similarly, at the state level, the MLAs, the MLCs may be disqualified by the governor on the advice given by the Election Commission of India. So they have a very, very important role here. There is one more advisory function that people usually ignore. I am sure all of you have read about President's Rule, right? President's Rule that is mentioned in Article 356 of the Indian Constitution. Now, if you have read President's Rule of State Emergency, as you call it, the law says in usual circumstances, usually the President Rule can continue for 1 year. However, it might continue over 1 year and go up to 3 years under certain circumstances. One, if there is national emergency that has been proclaimed in the country and elections are not possible. Secondly, if you have to extend president rule for over 1 year, the Election Commission of India must give in writing that it is not possible to conduct elections here. Because it is not possible to conduct elections in this particular state, we have to increase the period of president rule. Only and only then the president rule will go beyond 1 year. So in that case also, how long the president rule will continue, when is it possible to hold elections, that also is an advisory function of the Election Commission of India. They also have quasi-judicial functions, meaning that, as I told you earlier, whenever there is an issue about elections, disqualifying a certain person, especially for corrupt practices at elections, etc., then the matter goes to Supreme Court and High Court. They also refer the matter to Election Commission of India for their opinion only. Not just whether the person should be disqualified or not, but if so, for how much time period should the person be disqualified. So they have a very important role here as well. When they advise to the president about disqualifying members of parliament, or when they advise to the governor, all such advice will be binding on them. So they can disqualify members who even don't give an account of their election expenses within the given time period. Basically, any wrongdoing that you do can be punished by the Election Commission of India. You might have seen in the election campaigning when some politician actually does not follow the model code of conduct. They punish the politician by saying that you can't campaign for 2 days, for 48 hours, 72 hours, etc. All of this is the power of the Election Commission of India. Amongst the long list of powers, one very important power is the Model Code of Conduct. As you know, Model Code of Conduct is a set of guidelines issued by the Election Commission of India, which come into force as soon as the election dates are announced. So today, if the Election Commission of India holds a press conference, announces that, let's say on 15th December or 20th December, we have elections of a certain state. So from today itself, the Model Code of Conduct will begin. It is not a law passed by the Parliament. It is not mentioned in the Constitution of India. It is a set of guidelines that the Election Commission of India itself makes. For example, you cannot ask for votes from a religious place. You cannot give anything in exchange of votes. The government in power cannot release any new schemes. They can go ahead with their normal day-to-day business, but new scheme, new employment, etc. is not allowed during this period of the Model Code of Conduct. Why? So that they can ensure free and fair elections, because otherwise the party in power will always have an advantage over those who are in the opposition. Because the party in power can always launch any new schemes that they want. Now, the Model Code of Conduct, as I told you, it doesn't have any legal backing. Please do remember that. It doesn't have any legal backing as such. There is no constitutional provision for this also. There is no constitutional provision. It is just a set of guidelines by the Election Commission of India. So they decide what will be the guidelines. If they want to change, they can change them. Whatever changes that they want to introduce, all of them can happen through the Election Commission of India itself, as long as they can ensure free and fair elections are taking place. When does this come into force? As I said, as soon as the dates are announced. Usually we have a press conference when these dates are announced, as you saw recently, first for Himachal Pradesh, then for Gujarat. Whenever this was announced, you would have a situation where the Model Code of Conduct comes into the picture. Now, Election Commission of India is not just working for the political parties, for the politicians, they are also working in the interest of the common citizens of India. How? The Election Commission of India has been a very, very open platform, inviting the citizens if they want to file any complaint and if they want to give any feedback, they are free to do that. In fact, in the past few years, you might have seen the process of registering yourself for the voter ID card has become much easier. There are online registrations that are allowed. Not just this, Election Commission of India holds a lot of awareness programs as well. And awareness programs especially for the youth. For example, they even organize concerts, invite musicians, etc. so that they can actually have youth of the country coming out in large numbers and they can spread the message of how their vote is important and how you actually should come out and vote in large numbers. So that is also the responsibility of the Election Commission of India that they have taken up to ensure that they spread the message of voting in large numbers wide and across. They spread a lot of these awareness through events of different types. Not just this, at the state and at the district level, they also have a contact center where you can contact if you have any issues, and they also have a toll-free number for the same. Now, in all these things, you have to appreciate the Election Commission of India for doing all this. However, you also have to remember, doing all of this requires money. If you're running an awareness campaign, if you're running a call center, running an online platform, all of this requires expense. This is also something that is interesting. Election Commission of India doesn't have any source of revenue. So what do? They have to ask the government of India for all their expenses. And the government of India usually gives them whatever money that they want. But this is not always the case. Have you heard of VVPAT? VVPAT are small machines that are attached with the EVM machine. Now, VVPAT is voter verifiable paper audit trail. So when you vote for a certain candidate, there's a machine nearby attached to it. It will print a slip which will have the name of the party, the symbol of the party. You can just cross-check if the same person, the same button that you actually press, is it the same person or the same party on the slip or not. This is just to verify and actually ensure that the vote is going to the correct person. Now, what happened was, if you remember a few years back, whenever the election results used to come out, many political parties used to say that we don't trust the EVM, you press some button, the vote goes somewhere else. Everyone was demanding we want the VVPAT. Why? Because using VVPAT, you can actually cross-check, count the number of slips and then count the number of votes, are they same or not. Now, what happened was the demand for VVPAT was very, very old. It's not a new demand. But what happened was to introduce VVPAT across the entire country. Now it is happening. In the Lok Sabha election, for example, and in every state elections, every EVM now has a VVPAT with it. But earlier, it took a lot of time to actually introduce VVPATs. It was first introduced in just a few constituencies. Then it was increased further. When a petition was filed in the Supreme Court, why is it that it is taking so much time for the Election Commission of India to have VVPATs attached to every EVM machine? They said that the government of India is just not giving them enough budget. They said that we have been requesting to the Election Commission to the government of India that we want budget for the VVPAT machine, and we just were not getting that. By order of the Supreme Court, finally the government actually agreed that okay, we'll give you the budget, and it became mandatory that in the Lok Sabha election, for example, in the entire country, every EVM machine will have a VVPAT. Similar is the case with the state elections also. So there are instances of the Election Commission of India being dependent on the government of India for its expenses, although it has never happened that the government of India has refused to give them the money. But again, with this example of VVPAT, you can see how much money is given, when is it given, that also is a big, big concern. One other aspect of Election Commission of India which we usually ignore is that Election Commission of India is a body that is appreciated across the entire world and not just in India. Understand this. Having elections in such a huge country such as India, with huge number of voters, so much diversity, many people who are illiterate don't even know how to read, how to write, in most difficult places to reach. When you have the responsibility of conducting such elections, and thankfully Election Commission of India has been fulfilling that responsibility since our independence in a very emphatic form. We have never had a situation where a political party says, no, I don't accept it, I have lost, Election Commission of India is corrupt, I will not leave power. This has never ever happened in India. We might have had other problems, but this has never come to a situation where the Election Commission of India is not trusted. So that is why many countries around the world, especially in Asia, look up to the Election Commission of India and they actually learn from them. India's Election Commission holds trainings, seminars. We train a lot of people around the world to actually conduct elections properly. For this purpose, the Election Commission has even set up a body called India International Institute of Democracy and Election Management. This is a body which is a training and capacity building arm of the Election Commission of India, and it keeps on organizing webinars and training workshops, etc. for bodies that are conducting elections in other parts of the world, especially in South Asia. For example, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Bhutan, these are bodies or these are the countries which usually participate in all these outings. So Election Commission of India has brought a great name for India and Indian democracy all across the entire world. It is not just with India, it is actually across the world that they are spreading our name far and wide. So we have to appreciate where the appreciation is due. Having said that, there are still certain major flaws in the Election Commission. Let me tell you what are those, which is why the Supreme Court also is talking about this. First, Constitution is silent about removal process of the other two election commissioners. So as I told you, Constitution says there shall be a chief election commissioner and as many election commissioners as you want from time to time. While the Constitution tells us everything about chief election commissioner, the removal part, the appointment part, everything is mentioned. For the other election commissioners, there is nothing clearly mentioned. Their removal process is not clearly mentioned. For example, the chief election commissioner can be removed in the same process as the Supreme Court judge. But for other election commissioners, they can be removed by the President of India on recommendation of the chief election commissioner. Meaning that for them, the removal process is not difficult. There is no clarity on that. Ideally, it should be written in the Constitution itself because see, all these three are supposed to have equal powers, equal responsibilities. So why not have equal functions here as well? But that is not the case. Second, Constitution has not prescribed any qualification for members of Election Commission of India, which is a big concern. As I said, I don't want to compare this with any other body, but look at many other statutory bodies, constitutional bodies, which have proper eligibility criteria who can be appointed here. With Election Commission of India, although it is such an important body, we still don't have any proper eligibility criteria mentioned anywhere in the Constitution. So usually a free hand is given to the government to appoint IAS officers, civil servants who are close to them at these positions, which is very unfair for those parties that are not in power. Thirdly, the Constitution of India, interestingly, although it does it for most other constitutional bodies, but the Constitution does not debar the retired election commissioners from further appointment under the government. That is also a big concern. Like CAG, etc., they are barred from any further appointment under government of India after retirement. Meaning that once the CAG retires, they can't have any other government job. With Election Commission of India, this clause has not been mentioned in the Constitution. In other words, the Election Commission of India or the election commissioners can still take up other jobs after their retirement. This is a big concern. The reason why constitutional bodies are not allowed usually to take up other jobs after their retirement is that so that they could not expect a favor from the government. They can't expect that government will help them because they help the government. So this is to ensure independence. But interestingly, this is not mentioned for the election commissioners. Not just this, the executives enjoy power to make appointments that affect the Election Commission of India's independence as well. As I told you, the election commissioners are appointed by the President of India on the advice of the Prime Minister, the Council of Ministers. There is absolutely no role of the opposition, no role of the judiciary. Usually the IAS officers, the civil servants who are considered close to the government are given these positions, and it has been the same with every political party in the past. It's not fair to blame the only political party that is in power right now. If you look at the trend, even if you see, we discussed in the beginning that the Supreme Court judge who has actually criticized the government has specifically said that since 2004 only, the chief election commissioners have not been given their complete tenure. So it's not just the present government, it's all the political parties that are mainly in power that are responsible because none of them changed this. Anyone could have, but none of them changed this. So all of them have to take the part blame for this. This is everything that we needed to discuss about this entire issue that is in the news. The Election Commission of India, what the Supreme Court is saying. The demand for reforms in the Election Commission of India, especially when it comes to appointment, is very old. Many commissions, including the second ARC, also has said about the need to change this, but no political party has shown the will to do that. Maybe it is time for the Supreme Court to step in and they have to dictate terms under the special powers given to them in Article 142. But whether or not it happens, it remains to be seen. Till then, we'll just have to keep a track of the news. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next week for another explained session at 8 p.m. on Friday. Bye-bye. Have a good day. Jai Hind.